This is Changemakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Janine Betsey, the Director of Tax Credit Operations at the Gene B. Glick Company, where she leads strategies to preserve and rehabilitate affordable housing communities using low-income housing tax credits. Janine has a deep background in community development and a passion for helping people in affordable housing. I'm so excited to have her here on the Changemakers podcast and to highlight everything that she is currently doing and to get to know her better. So, Janine, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. You've had some amazing guests. I feel really honored to be one of them. So thank you.
And it's a pleasure to have somebody from Indianapolis too. So I want to dive deep because, it's all the rage right now with the fever and the Pacers. And we can have some fun conversations related to Indianapolis. So let's get started though. Um, what I usually like to do, I want to open it up to have you just kind of talk through your current role. But why don't you first start to tell us about how you got started in affordable housing and just what your journey has been like to get you into that current role?
Okay. So I worked out in Washington, D.C. for a few years. And then when I moved back to Indianapolis, a colleague of mine who was working at a community development corporation was like, "Hey, I have this asset management job that you'd be perfect for." And I was like, "Really? I don't know anything about asset management." And she was like, "No, you know all about grant compliance, all these other things. Come on, apply for the job." So I applied for the job and worked for a community development corporation that worked in the downtown Indianapolis area. Went on and got my master's degree. And then from the learnings at that particular agency, I went to become an executive director at another community development corporation called King Park Area Development Corporation. It was a very interesting time. We're talking like early 2000s, mid 2000s. So money was tight. Obama came in and implemented some really exciting programs. So neighborhood stabilization came out. We were one of 5 national smart growth districts in the country, so we got investments from DOT, HUD, coordination with IHCDA, and we really focused in on this area around the Monon Trail in Indianapolis, kind of 16th to 25th Street. That's just continuing to grow and flourish from those initial investments that we made in 2005. After that, I had the pleasure of working with Mike Petrie, who's the president of Merchants Bank of Indiana. And at the time, we had a Section 8 property that was at the end of its tax credit compliance. And we were trying to figure out what to do with it. It was supposed to be home ownership, and it really wasn't set up for home ownership. So we had all these conversations about it. And then he says, "Janine, I have this small nonprofit and, I think you'd be great at running it." So I went to join Mike's team as one staff person. Um, and we grew that organization into over $100 million of assets. We added, we came to 2,500 units, and there was 783 in there when I started. And I really got the bug for the deal, the projects, closing the projects. I already had the passion and the nonprofit background of working with residents, but I really figured out how much the financial side made me tick. So at the time, we worked with a lot of developers that had never done 4% deals. So we had the pleasure of working with Glick. And once they decided to kind of build out a tax credit team, I was like, "Oh, this is for me." Because the irony is the first place I ever lived as a child was a Glick property. And then the last place my grandma lived before she passed away was a Glick property. So I was like, "This is meant for me." They we just do a great job with resident services, and we have all these amazing assets in high quality suburbs that we're going back through and recapitalizing both the physical and the other people assets on site.
Mhm. When you grew up in that, or when you first lived in that, Glick property, was it, mixed income or, do you remember anything that stands out, from your time there?
It was a mixed income property. It was a great townhouse. My parents were babies when they had me, so they were very young. And I do think when my dad first moved in, when they moved in, they qualified for Section 8 at the time. And then they transitioned off of it. And they could stay, which is important, you know. So yes, it was a mixed income property. It had a pool. It was right by all kinds of amenities. So it was great.
So you kind of had the, trifecta there. You had, some, subsidy associated. You had an excellent management company and a great location. So, which is what Gene Glick, does very, very well, are those that nice trifecta there. And in Indianapolis, which is a great market, just kind of thinking about the market dynamics. Indianapolis, I remember, back in the, I guess that would be the 90s, really went through some substantial community development, and it started creating all of those community development corporations. And the Department of Metropolitan Development really got aggressive with the use how they were curing slum and blight with federal funds. And so it really started a lot of development. And it was featured in many national awards and so forth. But, now look at what those properties have become, and they're still standing strong. And they have done exactly what the original goal was, is to keep creating investment in those neighborhoods. Just thinking about the Indianapolis market, how have you seen that change through your time and your involvement? And maybe give us a glimpse of what's going on now with market dynamics.
So I think it continues to evolve. And one of the good things that's really happened in the last 10 to 12 years is organizations, what was King Park Area Development Corporation is now in Tind, Indiana, and they're taking such a more active role in really trying to provide affordable opportunities in our best neighborhoods. So there's such a good focus on making sure that the affordable also can support the market. That was one of the really interesting things about NSP, is that it went up to 120% AMI. So it
Mhm.
kind of hits that midpoint in the market where you really need that, because you've got your affordable buyers here with your subsidy, and then you've got your 80 to 120 that just need a little bit of
Right.
subsidy. And then you've got market. And sometimes when you don't have the middle, you can't quite get to the market,
Mhm.
because the market says, "Well, why do I have to pay $70,000 more than X?" Whereas when you have the flow, it just works a little better. So I see that it's difficult right now, with the interest rate environment for affordable buyers, and the appreciation, even in a market like Indianapolis, that was not a high appreciator in the last 4 to 5 years,
Mhm.
has been so significant that it's really, pricing people out.
Mhm.
Um, and then it becomes this, spiral effect, because you have these 80 to 120% renters in naturally occurring affordable rentals, trying to save, trying to get ready for that house,
Mhm.
and there's not space for that lower income person that needs to be in that unit.
Right.
So it creates this whole stranglehold in the housing market, and I really see that it's getting, more intense here, just because of all those factors.
Yeah. Yeah, the market has really changed, and, they usually put in, Indianapolis bunched together with Columbus, Ohio, as far as how it is radically shifting and quickly in the last 5 years. So, that pinch on buyers, that pinch on affordable renters is really being exaggerated right now, which I guess folds nicely into what you guys are doing as far as your development and your rehab projects. So, to try to get in front of that tide a little bit, um, Glick is in what, 13 states.
Mhm.
Why don't you tell us what you guys are doing and give us some overview of those projects you're working on.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're really looking back through our portfolio and saying, we've taken incredibly good care of our properties. They're older than 40 years. Kitchen
Hmm.
cabinets get tired, furnaces need replaced, and those have been replaced ongoing wise. But in terms of how do we really give a fresh update for our residents and our properties? So we work with a company called CRG Residential on a rapid rehab model. It's fantastic. We are going in, we're doing all new kitchens, new baths. We're putting in solid surface countertops like you're seeing in your
Nice.
nice suburban partner apartments. We're enhancing on-site amenities, building dog parks. This year we implemented, like, we're doing a package of what do the residents really want? We have all these common areas. Do we need new tables? Do we need new
Hmm.
couches? Do we want to outfit a craft room? So we're trying to also be responsive that now we have these new magical spaces. How do we enhance some of them? But we're also taking care of, you know, electrical panels. We're modernizing elevators that haven't been modernized in
Hmm.
50 years. We've taken incredibly good care of what we have, but that only gets us so far. And as part of the process, what happens when we're working on the physical rehab, we're really revisiting our services and what we're doing for residents and saying, okay, as we just have a phenomenal resident services department, and we've been really focused on family and senior services. And so we have this model where we're focusing on the 10 dimensions of self sufficiency, with housing stability being the most important, food security second, utilities on, and kind of working down that list with residents in one on one and group situations. So we're refreshing the physical assets at the same time that we're enhancing the service assets. So it's a really special time.
Hmm.
It's hard, rehabbing 204 units in less than 6 months is a big
Wow.
haul. But the other thing that we do is I always call it like a special team, like that would come on the field at the football game. We have a special region that when your property's under construction, you're under the special team. So that regional property manager supports the site, has their own associates, helps with the first year
Oh,
certifications,
okay.
the teaching of the tax credit, because
Yep.
most of our properties have only been Section 8.
Okay.
So layering on the tax credit is a whole new
Yeah.
intimidation factor.
Hmm.
So we really provide the support and services to make it as easy as possible for the site and the residents. Um, so we do a lot in Indiana, but we also have worked in Kentucky, and we have a project funded in Wisconsin. We're trying to get one of our projects funded in Georgia. Um, they make fun of me at the office because I love bonds. I think they're
Yeah.
fascinating and amazing. There's nothing like a tax exempt bond and an MTEB loan. It's just neat stuff. But we're really learning the nuances of working in other states, and just trying to be cognizant of working throughout our portfolio
Hmm.
um, where we can.
So, just stereotyping Glick, you guys are really known for customer service. You're known for amazing compliance, but there's also a nice niche that you guys do is curb appeal. And even with the properties being aged, you can drive around a property and say, that's a Glick property. before you even see the sign. And that's what I like so much about your guys' model. And then, this is obviously, before all of the construction and rehab, even on aged properties, you guys do such a nice job. The files are tight. You guys are responsive to your residents, but you guys have curb appeal nailed down. And it's often the gold standard that we talk about being a compliance entity that goes out and sees the difference. How did you guys adopt that, and how do you maintain that? Because people aren't driving by and saying, that's subsidized when they look at your guys' housing stock.
Yep. So I that was very important to Mr. Glick. Curb appeal was number one. And he would go around and visit all the properties on a schedule.
Mhm.
Apparently he came on a helicopter and people would get really excited about it. I never got to see that, but so it was always a very important to Gene and the company today that the properties don't look affordable, that you can't tell the difference. And I've had a colleague who told me that, when he first started, he was driven around and just like you said, "This is the gold standard. If you
Mhm.
want a property, and it's gonna be affordable, it needs to look like this." And we do have a number of affordable properties that have pools and other amenities that you typically see in market rate
Okay.
developments, and we maintain those. Um, we do just make sure that that curb appeal is good. I will say on some of our rehabs, we've actually been like, wow, we've really planted too many trees. We're going to have to go back and take out, 10 of these 80 trees
Yeah.
because the maintenance people say the grass doesn't grow.
Yeah.
But
Those are lessons learned though. So, when all the leaves are falling, you're like, "Wow, this is a mess."
And those are the things we budget for every year. When
Mhm.
when bushes are out of control, they'll have like, okay, we'll fix this building this year. We'll do this building next year. But it is just an ongoing budgetary requirement that we maintain and enhance that landscaping.
Yeah.
Because we don't call them apartments. We call them apartment homes. We don't call them units. We call them residents. That for so many people, they that live in rentals, myself included, you're bringing home your children to these homes, and we want them to be the best homes that they can be,
Mhm.
because some people may never own a home,
Mhm.
and some people might, but it needs to be a positive interim experience, because that's how people thrive.
Mhm. Speaking of how people thrive, I want you, if you're able to, give an overview of Mr. Glick himself, because I think sometimes we forget about the legacy. We look at like the end product of what he created and what he did for the community and everything he built, but then we forget that his early ramp into the business and the kind of person he was. So, for, those who don't know, can you give some of that story to us for more context?
Sure. So he originally started as a home builder because he wanted World War II veterans to have homes to come to. So him and his wife started out by building homes. And then they determined along the route, and it probably was when Section 8 came out and some other tools to develop apartments back in the day. So then they decided to move more into the multifamily realm, and he built a succinct team that worked on construction management and the compliance side. Kathy Overby, who was there for many, many years, started off in an accounting role and was the vice president of development when she left. Jim Besessi worked there till he was 80. He was head of construction, and they just really would figure out what worked well and duplicate it, you know? So you look at, many of our, properties and they look similar, you know, because that was what worked. You needed some flats, you needed some townhouses, and, you know, they just would refine it over and over again. The other thing was, Mr. Glick is known for being incredibly generous, to both the wider Indianapolis and related community, as well as to his employees. So they really prioritize family benefits that are good for people. And they just really had a caring environment.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think the other thing that I see is there was a lot of promotion from within and empowerment of the existing employees. And you see with the next generation at the helm that same care and concern and really the modeling of those family
Yeah.
values.
Let's talk about the Glick Housing Foundation because that's also something very unique for what you guys are doing. Can you give us a couple of ideas of the imprint or how some of those projects roll out?
Yes. So anything that is purchased at this point by the company is all for the Glick Housing Foundation to build up long-term assets for the foundation. And when properties are purchased that don't have a service coordinator, the
Mhm.
Housing Foundation commits to funding either a part-time or a full-time service coordinator on site. So we've been focused on preserving Section 8 properties that are for sale, as well as other kind of naturally occurring, affordable properties,
Mhm.
also tax credit properties that are at the end of their compliance period. So we're focused on preserving what is going out to the market, bringing it into the portfolio. Sometimes it is slated for a tax credit rehab,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. And then, you know, we once it's purchased, there's a internal reserve that is used to immediately make you know, if it doesn't have a playground and it's a family property or the playground's tired, those are the first improvements we make. What can we do to show people that we care and
Mhm.
we want to enhance their physical assets? And
Mhm.
then, you know, some other might be used on deferred maintenance or other items that came up during inspection. But the goal is to immediately just stabilize the properties if they weren't, you know, some of them were stable when we bought them, and that's not the case. But
Mhm.
other times we're just trying to stabilize and let the residents know we care, and then just start working with the residents on what they need.
Mhm.
Um, the Housing Foundation has been very aggressive in the last few years in purchasing these new properties, and we've just have some really nice assets that have come online for the
Mhm.
Housing Foundation.
Is there a project that you're particularly proud of or that you wanna share? Are you allowed to have a favorite that, maybe it was because of a deal, that you did that you didn't think was gonna happen? Something like that you can share with us?
Well, I will say yes. So one of the properties that we did rehab was in Flint, Michigan, and it was our first project with MISHDA.
Right.
And it was a Section 8 conversion to you know, tax credit, and it was important to me because it was located in a high quality suburb of Flint. It didn't have the pipe issues. It didn't have some of the
Mhm.
water issues that are, really detrimental in the inner city in Flint. And it was located in a really good school district. So we
Nice.
had a lot of, you know, just sophisticated residents that had moved to our apartment because they could get quality IEP services for
Okay.
their children.
Mhm.
And that was a harder rehab, but we really worked with the residents to ensure it was as easy as possible. You know, and we worked with one resident and helped her secure additional housing She was over income from the tax credit project, not required to move, but we worked with her and really got her in a great position in a home to rent for her and her children. It was just pretty special,
Mhm.
because she was so adamant, like, this is my school. I need to be here, and I think sometimes there's not a real understanding of who actually is a low to moderate income renter
Mhm.
and what they are. And there's very many hardworking folks out there that are making a way for their family and are very sophisticated and they're moving to the best places for their families. So to be able to
Right.
support residents like that and help them stay if that's the right outcome, or if it's not, helping them end up in a better place is
Mhm.
really meaningful.
Mhm.
Because that's what we want for ourselves and our families,
Right.
and that's what we want for our
Right.
residents.
Just one of those core human basic needs of safety, security, decent housing. But it's not a given, is it?
Mm-mm.
And I've actually read some recent statistics that say about 80% of people who are living in affordable housing are all full time working people. So it is not the stereotype that's out there. And I think the statistics have maybe even changed over the years as to what's happening. So you bring up a good point. It's people who cannot afford rents that are skyrocketed to, the 1,200, $2,500 to be in those neighborhoods and with those school systems. So it leads me to another thought here. Are you seeing a lot of public-private partnerships that are being required for you to make the deal happen? Is that the typical model, or are you guys, kind of keeping it all contained within the Glick family of how you're doing these development deals?
We do really work with pilots, tax pilots, especially in Indiana. You can get a reduction on your taxes in exchange for providing services to residents.
Mhm.
And so that is a tool that we utilize. But usually we are able to do them without a number of public private partnerships. So we are able to mostly keep it in house
Yeah.
and get them done. It's more difficult because most of our properties are not in a qualified census tract,
Okay.
so they don't get the boost on a 4% project, which a lot of projects need. But we've been able to figure it out.
Mhm.
And I always say that is like the blessing of our properties is that many of them are in suburban areas where you would not be able to put back any apartment complex, let alone an affordable one. But it's also the curse because then it's like we never get the boost,
Right.
So
Right. So, one other thing I was thinking about, I'm glad you mentioned Kathy Overby. Tell her I said hello. I haven't talked to her in a little bit. I hope she's enjoying retirement.
he is loving it.
I'm sure. Um, but when you were mentioning her name, she was such an icon in trying to make, well, for many reasons, but for trying to make the innovative policy pieces happen and come together to say, like, okay, this is how it really works in the field. This is how the deals need to be done. And she used her voice so well to make that happen. Are you seeing any trends right now on innovative policy making moving forward? Like what's happening in that space? What changes are happening in order to make the deal better, faster for you guys who are out there doing it? What do you see on the horizon right now?
Well, I think the big thing will be what happens with the tax bill and
Hmm.
the proposed kind of 25% test. I've been thinking about this. I'll be like, this is really the third iteration
Yeah.
of crazy change I've seen in my career. And so I'm just, I think the 25% test is great. I think the stabilization of additional credits is great. What
Mhm.
I've noticed is it always comes at not the best time,
Mm.
So I think we'll get the 25% test. There's going to be more credits, and investors are already pulling back some on what
Yeah.
they're paying and and even investors that don't want to invest anymore. So I think initially, I think it'll be hard, and I think it'll dramatically change the debt tools people are using,
Mm.
because people use a MTEB loan or all these loans that are backed by the bonds that you're
Mhm.
getting on the project. But if the bonds go down to 25%, you're not gonna be able to use that
Mm.
product anymore.
Right, right.
So I think that there is a big shift coming regardless. And I think once we know what the opportunity zones are going to look like, if there's a 25% test, I think there'll be a lot of scrambling. Okay, we're going to have to do things differently. Maybe people will go back to, "Yeah, let's do a 223F again, but right now, I see a lot of people in a holding pattern.
Okay.
And I would say this year we've been more strategic than in prior years, and we really looked at CRA markets before we decided which projects we were going to underwrite for the year. Because I'm like, pricing's going down. Our projects don't have a boost. We've got to put forth our best projects in the best CRA areas because we're the best sponsor.
Mhm,
Can
mhm.
get the best equity.
Yeah.
But I think I am positive change is coming. And I'm trying to think about, what we're gonna do differently when that happens.
Mhm. Yeah. It's been fascinating to kind of see, but, you know, regardless of what the, definitions are or the allocations and stuff, the need for housing isn't changing, right? So, we've gotta do something in regards to making sure that we can get more in the pipeline and, still have the tools to, go through the process. So, I wanna switch back and go back to something we were talking about earlier. You mentioned that you were president of Merchants Affordable Housing Corporation, and we touched a little bit about some of those assets, and the circular loop here is, as I'm thinking out loud, is when you look at that type of a housing corporation um, that you were in there, is there still a need for more of those types of affordable housing corporations? Or, I'm thinking about, like, the tool by which this happens,
Yep.
right? Um, any commentary there?
Absolutely. That was actually very intentional. Mike Petrie and I were looking around the country. One, Indianapolis has a small number of CDFIs
Mhm.
compared to cities of our size. Secondarily, we didn't have a bridge housing, a
Okay.
Mercy
Right.
housing,
Right.
one of a really large nonprofit developer
Yep.
with a balance sheet. So we set out to build that
Mhm.
because we just didn't have any. So and the idea was always that we wanted other people to also do that. So,
Right.
like, Intend Indiana really built up its CDFI and
Yeah.
is doing both homeownership and some developer lending. But I personally believe there's room for more of that in the market. And you do see around the state of Indiana some other organizations that are growing like that, but it keeps Indiana and Indianapolis from being competitive because we don't have those kind of
Right.
supercharged entities.
Yeah.
And we need more of them if we really want to tackle the lack of affordable units.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly, and I think that the appetite and the market and everything's there, so it's like the platform's there, it's just, we need some launching, don't we?
We do. And I think the other thing is just really, like, no one knows what the resources are gonna be, Is home gonna be there? Is CDBG gonna be there? And those switches have gone on and off for many, many
Yeah.
years.
Yep.
So it's not anything new, but there's a greater sense of uncertainty, and there were so many amazing resources, the ARPA funds, NSP was an amazing tool, so it's, whether opportunity zones or something else can be capitalized on like that, will really tell if we can increase production.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of even go through the cycles. I call them the acronym soup or the alphabet soup. You'll have NSP1, NSP2, and then you've got everybody's got all the acronyms. But we'll work within the framework and get it spent doing the right things, won't we?
Absolutely, and that's what I tell the young developers. I'm just like, "Always be ready. You
Yeah.
never know what's coming." Something could come from the state,
Yeah. Yes.
there all kinds of things. You always gotta have things ready to go because
Yep.
something's always around the bend.
Yep. I want to do a shout out to a couple of awards that you've gotten, and I'm going to look at my list here. But you have been mentioned on the Indianapolis Business Journal's 40 Under 40. You have also been mentioned in the Indy Star Women to Watch categories. You've won national awards and state awards for your leadership style. Tell us not just, I mean, an award is great, but it's capturing who you are and what you're doing. So tell us, like, what does what does kind of like working in this industry, what does it do for you? Like, why are you doing it? The deals are hard. There's never enough funding. But why are you doing it?
To me, housing is literally the most important thing that we can do for people. You see people in crisis and they cannot stabilize if they don't have a home. And you see children in crisis and they cannot learn and grow if they're not home, there's definitely other factors that play into that, but, I grew up in apartments. I brought home my children to apartments, and, I mean, weirdly, I probably know all the apartments in Indianapolis and their old names, so I'll be like, "Oh, you mean Nora Pines? Oh, yeah, that's, something on the Monon now, or North Side on the Trail," or whatever it is, but you watch all these iterations of the apartments, and you just want them to be what they were to me or to the friends I grew up with. My friends in high school that got to go to North Central because they could live in affordable apartments. So I do it because I just grew up in apartments. Homeownership was really, we only lived in a house once. We rented some houses, and I am fortunate to live in a house today, but, it just never seemed like it was attainable. So I just want the apartment experience, especially for affordable, and moderate income renters to be as good as it is for market rate renters. When you come home and you have the same solid surface countertop as that $2,500 apartment, it teaches you that you have the same value as everybody else. And when you don't feel like you have value, it translates into everything you do and you are. I've always just wanted people to feel like they have value.
One of the ways I see this most obvious is when you look at how people do their laundry in their apartments. And when you talk about value and lifestyle, it is that is to me is always symbolic to say, how are you doing daily life in an apartment? And so many affordable housing communities haven't had individual laundry hookup. And a lot of that was the part of the time,
Yeah.
that, the '60s or '70s when they were built, and that the laundromat and the way laundry was done, but, like, when you really break that apart and say, "Do working people have access to do their own laundry within their own unit, or do they have to go to a laundromat, or is there an on-site laundry? And, like, to me, that just, like, there's pieces of this that, people don't even think about when you build units or when you're living in subsidized housing, and it's not a poverty marker, okay, but it just symbolizes so many other things that are being signaled with where people live. And, that's a small piece. You've got access to healthcare, you've got access to schools. But when you put them all together, what are apartments doing? Are they enhancing their lives so they can move up,
Yeah.
or are they keeping them in different cycles? So, what I like about what Glick does so well is you guys look at that comprehensive continuum, and you're not just saying, hey, here's your rent and this is when it's due. This is when it's due. You guys really look at that comprehensive continuum. How Speak to some of that because it's something different than what a lot of other companies do.
Yes. No, we really do. It's kind of the thing of when you work with somebody like that, when you're a property manager on site, you literally see people on their best and their worst days,
Mhm.
because they live there, they're coming to you, they know you, they bring you successes, they bring you challenges. And like when you started it out and you talked about customer service being a high priority, it really means something to Glick how the team interacts with the humans,
Mhm.
with our residents, and treating them with care and concern on their best and their worst days.
Yeah.
Because so many when you're not doing that, just to your point, you're just reinforcing the cycles.
Right.
And that is never anything I want to be a part of.
Mhm.
I do
Mhm.
not want to reinforce systemic barriers. And so we work really hard to break down those systemic barriers.
Mhm.
And just they are so intentional about the programs. We have a partnership with Green Gleaners. They bring food boxes on site. When we're doing our rehabs, we know not everybody has transportation for the 3 days they might need to stay at a hotel, so we help them get there. We help them pack up. It's not a shame game of, "Oh, you have all this stuff." It's, "How do we help you get ready for this enhancement to
Mhm.
your, properties?" Um, Now I lost my train of thought.
No, I mean, I like to highlight what you guys do because it really is it's more than the bricks and sticks, as they say.
It is, it is. I mean, services are a core competency and component of every property, whether they have a on-site coordinator or not. And we've been working to pilot some other items where if we don't have a HUD-funded service coordinator, it's not a foundation project, or the property has less of a need based on the residents that live there, we're
Mhm.
still trying to figure out how we can get more services on site,
Mhm.
because it's the most important thing we can do.
Mhm. Well, Janine, I appreciate you taking the time. Why don't you close us out here and give us some encouragement to just keep pushing forward?
Okay, I would say everything happens in a cycle, and if the cycle is bad, I can assure you there are enough smart people out there that are gonna figure out how to make it work. I've seen that over and over in my career. There's so many smart, talented people that work in this field, and don't despair because something is around the bend that will help it get better.
Mhm. And, we've seen that with a lot of different programs where, people have surged, nonprofits have surged, the financing ends up coming in at the last minute. So it's part of all of our resilience stories, isn't it?
It is, and affordable housing is definitely resilient.
That's exactly right. Well, Janine, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to host you and hear everything that Glick is doing and what the Indianapolis market is doing. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Katie.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.